Hey guys, how's it going? Darth Valley here. So I know I've been promising a lot of motorcycle content to come soon. So I've a little bit behind on my chain maintenance here. So today we're actually going to go through and I wanted to walk you sort of step by step on what we're going to be doing today for, let's see if I can get it into focus here, on the Kawasaki. So we're going to be doing the chain maintenance today. Basically, it's due for a chain clean for sure, and we're also going to be doing the chain tension today because it's a little bit out of spec. So yeah, let's jump right into it. So first things first here, I got the chain guard off. It's basically 2 bolts. Really simple. We got a bolt here and here, and you'll need a 5mm Allen key to get those done, and it simply just slides off this direction. So as you can see, chain is just slightly out of spec and it's a bit dirty. Luckily where I'm at we don't get too much rain, but it's definitely due for a clean. So real quick, we are going to go over the tools that you need for this job. Here's the chain guard with our specs. The chain is supposed to be at most 1.2 inches of slack when it's adjusted, and it's a little bit out of spec there. So like I said, 2 bolts, 5mm Allen key for those 2 bolts. Guard comes right off. As far as the rear axle and being able to shift the tire backwards, we'll need a 27mm socket for the bigger side and a 22mm socket for the slightly smaller side. For the adjustment bolts, you're going to need a 12mm wrench and a 14mm wrench. I also have a torque wrench to be able to torque the rear axle nuts to spec. If I'm not mistaken, it's supposed to be 95 foot-pounds. And of course, brake cleaner and lubricant of your choice. So first thing we're going to get done is we're actually going to clean the chain first. That way it's already nice, clean, and lubed before we actually bring the tire back and get this chain tightened up. So one thing I did forget to mention is you might have this cap over here covering this nut, and then you should have a cotter pin in here. So I also recommend having a set of needle nose pliers, and that way you'll be able to unbend the cotter pin, take it out, and be able to loosen this up. So we'll get this removed, and like I said, first thing we're going to do is get the chain clean. And I'd really recommend not starting up the bike and putting it in first and having the wheel go around. Basically the way that I do this, so I make sure I have all my fingers, is I'll spray the chain cleaner on the chain, and then I have this fancy chain cleaner brush here to get all of the different directions and everything on the chain, and then I will manually turn the wheel with my hand, and I'll scrub along as I go, making sure I get the chain clean. And then what I'll do is I'll take an old rag and wipe off all of the extra chain clean, and then at that point it's the lube of your choice. And then after that, we will start the chain adjustment. Okay, so now that we have our chain clean and lubed, hopefully you guys can tell a difference. The chain was actually pretty black, so now it's a lot better. It's not perfect, but I don't mind it having a little bit in the gaps here. It's good enough for me. So next step, we're going to take our needle nose pliers and undo this cotter pin. That way we can use our 27mm socket and undo this. And then from there, we're going to loosen these on each side, and that will allow us to pull the tire backwards. I recommend doing this with a breaker bar. With this one, I have a 1/2-inch breaker bar for the socket. And the way we actually measure the chain tension is, what you'll do is you'll go all the way up and then all the way down. And then you'll basically measure from here to here. And that's with it not propped up like this, but on the kickstand. And I know there's not too much of a difference. So usually here, that's about 2 inches. So we basically want to go from this to only about that much movement in the chain. All right. Okay, so you can see we've got our cotter pin taken out. The 27mm size is loosened up, and we've got our 22 size loosened up so the tire can move forward and backward. Basically, at this point, we're going to loosen up these nuts here on each side. One set there, one set there. And basically, we loosen up the 12mm size first on each, and then we'll loosen up the 14. And once that's done, we basically take the wheel, pull it backwards till we get the tension that we want. And we actually have these grooves built into the swing arm, and we can use this portion right here on both sides to measure and make sure that the tire is even. And then I always come behind and double check and look right down and make sure that the wheel is straight. Okay, so now I've got my chain adjusted to the proper tension. So now we're going to be adjusting these nuts. What I want to do first is tighten down the further one so it's right up against the bigger one. So that'll be your 12mm nut, and I'll get it hand tight right up against the 14mm nut, and I'll do that on both sides of the bike. That way the tire doesn't shift anymore. And I always double check these adjustment points up here and make sure that they're even on both sides, so your tire isn't skewed to the left or to the right. So now what you want to do is take your 14mm wrench, slip it on the 14mm nut, and you do not move this wrench. What you do at this point is you keep that 14mm steady, you bring in your 12mm, and you tighten it against the 14. That way the two lock into place and they don't move. And I do this little by little on each side, so that way the tire doesn't move or shift or anything like that. So I got that side, same tightness as this side. So I come back, make sure I don't move the 14mm wrench, and I just tighten up the 12 up against the 14 like so, and then we'll go in reverse of what we did before. And so that is tight. Double checking the chain tension, it's still good. Now what we'll do at this point is we'll tighten up our, where is it? Get it into focus. We'll tighten up our 22 millimeter and our 27 millimeter. We'll put our cotter pin back in once we get to the 95 foot-pounds. Okay, so now we have our torque wrench set to 95 foot-pounds, and obviously we will tighten that until we get our click. And then, if I'm not mistaken, the manual says once you get to that point, you back it up until you can get the cotter pin through one of the holes. 95. So I'll make sure we go nice and slow. Don't want to overdo it. Make sure we're using the end of the torque wrench. I feel like we're getting close here soon. And there we go, 95 foot-pounds. Kind of hard to miss that click. So now I'll go back to our breaker bar super quick. So as you can see here, we're just, actually, since we're already aligned, we should be able to get it right in there. And then once we get to that point, we put our cap back on. Oh, sorry. Yeah, once we get our cotter pin back in, we get our cap back on, and we're done. All right, so now you can see we got the cotter pin back in. We got our rubber protection back on here for the nut. And our chain is now where it needs to be. It used to come all the way down here and then go pretty far up this way. So now we're back in spec here, and that's it. That's all you need to do in order to get your chain clean and chain back into spec.